honestly thought it would be interesting.
All of you moving to Japan would be a dream come true, right? But interestingly, I know so many people from overseas that moved to Japan and hated it.
I lived briefly in Japan a while ago. The year I spent in Japan was probably the most unhappy of my life.
So don't be surprised if it happens to you. Almost everyone who moves to Japan will hate Japan or Japanese culture sooner or later. You might think it's impossible, especially Japan has so many cool things like anime, crazy game shows, and Mr. E's favorite electric baths. Yes, in some public baths in Japan, there are baths that send electric currents into the water. But don't worry, it's totally safe because water doesn't conduct electricity at all. I've known so many people from overseas who moved to Japan and then hate Japan after living here for months or sometimes years later. They usually come here because they loved video games, Japanese culture, or they just wanted some good old-fashioned Japanese fucking. Check out our new merch if you want some fucking too. But after a while of living here, they become depressed. They hate Japan, and the only thing they want is go back to home.
What is that?
Snake, are you okay? Dad, I hate Japan. I want to go home.
There are many reasons why it happens. Maybe some of you have heard of cultural iceberg. If you imagine the culture of one country to be an iceberg floating in the ocean, the part of the iceberg you can see is usually the material aspect of the country's culture. So for Japan, this would be video games, Japanese food, cosplay, statues of Colonel Sanders in samurai armor, food, cosplay.
Bro, was he about to sock her, bro? This man was about to mollywop her, bro. He was about to send her to the Dooney Uni land, bro. He's about to send her to the
Statues of Colonel Sanders in samurai armor, you know, obvious Japanese stuff. But what you don't see is the rest of the iceberg. And this is where the non-material parts of the culture are. This can be things like ideas on work ethic, views on raising children, how society views discriminated people. It's usually this part of the cultural iceberg that we all will have problems with when we move to a new country. So, because most of you who are watching this video might be interested in living in Japan or moving to Japan in the future, so I thought it would be a great idea to ask Mr. Eats to talk about his own experience and how he's been dealing with it.
Hello everyone, it's Mr. Eats. Now let's say you have this big plan to move to Japan. As you begin to prepare for your move, you start dreaming about all the adventures that you're gonna get into. Your happiness level starts to go higher and higher, and then you finally make that trip across the ocean, you get off the plane, and you're standing smack dab in the middle of Tokyo. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the experience is all so overwhelming. Now every single thing that you're doing feels like a grand adventure and your happiness is just going through the roof. Welcome to the honeymoon phase. This is the first of 4 phases of culture shock that you're going to experience. Now for most people, this is the most incredible part about moving to a new country. You're going to love the culture, the language, and the people. Seriously, you could get mugged in a back alley and you'll probably come out of it saying, wow, that was the most polite mugging I've ever had. Now the amount of time that you spend here in the honeymoon phase and the next 3 phases varies from person to person. Now when I moved to Japan, I was placed in this really nice little countryside town where I quickly made friends and became a part of the local community. I fell in love with every aspect of that town and the people around me. Heck, I even loved my job as an English teacher there. I found so much joy and happiness there that by the ripe old age of 28, I was considering my retirement there. But all of that came crashing down after I met Mrs. Eats. What? No, I... Welcome to the living room floor where we will be spending the rest of our night tonight. Now, what I wanted to say was that meeting Mrs. Eats was the best thing that could have ever happened in my life. But it was all of the other circumstances that followed that led me to a really, really dark place in life. The second phase of culture shock, the frustration phase. Now, once you hit the peak of happiness during the honeymoon phase, you'll start to get used to the new world around you. and your happiness will actually begin to decline pretty quickly. The things you found most exciting have now become very, very normal to you, and the things that you didn't mind too much actually become annoying or even frustrating. But the frustration phase goes much, much deeper than that. This is a point where depression, resentment, and anger really can start to set in. And yes, even though I love Japan now, there was a point in time where I really hated it and I wanted to go back home.
Dad.
So as my relationship with Mrs. Eats got deeper and deeper and we got closer and closer, I decided to leave that small town that I love so much to the big city of Osaka. There were a lot of factors that made daily living just incredibly difficult. The first was dealing with an actual Japanese style commute. Now in my old town, I lived about a 5-minute bike ride away from school, so I never had to get on a train or a bus. But here in Osaka, I had to get on some of the most crowded trains and subways. Not only that, but my school was 2.5 hours away. So I was up at 5:30 to get to school by 8, and it was a nightmare. After the 2.5-hour journey, I was rewarded not by friendly, smiling faces, but by... Unless I was a cool, young, handsome boy like one of these members from the band Kiss My Foot 2, I wasn't gonna get these kids interested at all. And yes, their name is in fact Kiss My Foot 2. So every day became this nightmare of getting on packed trains, lecturing in front of disinterested students, and me just putting on this face like everything was okay. Job dissatisfaction is one of the biggest reasons why you will hate Japan, and it's one that I've heard from my fellow expats over the years. You'll most likely find yourself working as an English teacher at some point in your life in Japan. And while I did love teaching at the school that I was at in my small town, it really wasn't the case for my school in the bigger city of Osaka. And to add insult to injury, there is a glass ceiling when it comes to your actual salary. You'll quickly find that for most teaching jobs here in Japan, you're gonna hit the max of the salary, which is around 20 to 25K annually. And in a lot of cases, this wage will almost never rise. Now, you could earn more money if you started teaching at a university or at a wealthy private school. You're gonna be doing 2 to 3 times more work for that amount of pay. Now, while you're young and single, 25K isn't actually that bad. But once you start to settle down and you want to have kids, that 25K is not enough at all. And I haven't even mentioned that it's pretty common for Japanese women to quit their jobs after the child is born. So if you are a man and you are only earning 25K from your teaching job, you're gonna have to pick up a lot of part-time jobs in addition to your full-time job just to make ends meet. And trust me, it is insanely common how many of my expat teacher friends have part-time jobs on the side while they're still teaching full-time jobs. And here's another reason that you're gonna hate living in Japan: the differences in work culture and relationships at the office. Going back to our cultural iceberg, this is the stuff below the water. Things like office politics, relationships with your coworkers, the expectations that they have on you at work, and so many other different factors that are very, very different from what you're used to back home. Japanese societal hierarchy also plays a huge role in the workplace, and it's really important for you to be not only respectful, but be willing to go above and beyond for your superiors at work. And of course, workplace bullying does exist in Japan, so if you ever find yourself being treated unfairly, don't be surprised if you're told to just gaman, do your best through this whole situation. Loneliness and feeling isolated is another really big thing that you're going to hate in Japan. Now, most people move out of that honeymoon phase way quicker than they can actually establish a good, solid friend group. And I'm not just talking about occasional acquaintances that you see from time to time and you don't mind chatting to every now and then. I'm talking about people that you can really trust. Friends that not only share the same interests and culture as you, but friends who you can really open yourself up to. But even if you are able to establish those kinds of friendships, not a lot of them have plans to live there for as long as you may plan to. So it may be entirely possible that your new best friend was already planning to move to Thailand 6 months after you got here. And it just becomes tired to go through the same motions over and over and over, rebuilding a friendship, only to see that person eventually leave. So as the stress piles up and the loneliness sets in, this is when you really start to hit the lows of culture shock. And this is a bad place to be in because you just become so bitter and angry and blaming Japan and the country when in many cases, the country and the culture of Japan have nothing to do with whatever you're angry at. But thankfully, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's called the adjustment phase.
Uh-oh.
If you don't give up, you will start to adjust to whatever the situation is that you're in. Whether that's being more comfortable on relying on others to help you out, figuring out some solution to something annoying that's happening in your life, or maybe even getting your language skills up to a point where you can comfortably say things that you want to say. You'll eventually start to find some solutions, these little wins to problems in your life that make things a lot easier on yourself. And then eventually you're going to hit the final phase of culture shock, and that is the acceptance phase. You're finally going to be able to stop putting your own expectations onto Japanese society and trying to control things around you, and instead learning how to control yourself into better fitting into how Japanese society works. Of course, there are still going to be things that will bother you from time to time, but you're going to be in a much better mental space to deal with those problems. You're going to become more comfortable with your day-to-day life, and it's not going to feel like every day is a struggle.
So, what are some culture shock tips you would give to someone who is planning to move to Japan?
No matter who you are going to go through the phases of culture shock. And when you do eventually go through the frustration phase,
sir,
always remember that if you can stick through it, you're eventually going to go through the acceptance phase.
Oh shit, really? Gengi was in chat.
Try to learn the language as quickly as you can, because I would say that probably 95-99% of your frustration is going to be because you don't understand and you can't say what you want to say. Try to make friends with the locals. When you have friends that are local Japanese people, it's a lot easier to rely on them. And it's nice to know that these people are going to be here for as long as you plan to stay. Have a stash of your favorite foods in the closet for emergency situations whenever you're really missing home. There's something magical about it. It just makes you feel so much better, and it just relieves just a ton of stress.
Exactly the same thing happened when I was living in New Zealand. It was a long time ago, and then there were no Japanese grocery store. But you know, when I was living there, I missed Japanese snacks so much. So that's why I really wish I could get Bokusu at the time. Bokusu is today's sponsor, and it's also a subscription
That shit looks so bussin'.
box service where you can try so
Dang, I can't get it.
Give me a summary of the video, bro.
Basically, like, not everything is what it seems. Not everything
I mean,
is
ain't that what life is?
Yeah.
So they didn't really tell you what you're gonna hate living?
Oh, they did. Basically, so they said that you're gonna go through a culture shock phase. Basically, what that means is, a couple.
That's not in every culture. That's in every culture, right? It's just Japanese culture is different. That's if you don't understand it, though.
Yeah.
That's if you don't understand it, bro.
Yeah.
many different snacks from big companies to small, family-owned shops in Japan. When you start your own Bokusu subscription, you help us make more videos and live stream about Japan. Use the special link and coupon code EATS10 to save 10% up to $47 on your own Bokusu subscription now.
Save 10%. Saitama will be very happy to hear that.
Dude, I want to get, bro, when I get back, bro, I'm going to start buying these boxes. If you want a box too, I'll buy you one too, bro.
Really
For sure.
That's why
Appreciate
I'm
you.
so excited to recommend this to you. Using some Japanese
I ain't gonna lie, Japanese snacks look
similar to lemon, and they put yuzu kosho into.
I ain't gonna cap, Amaranth kind of bad, though.
Kimurasu.
It's good! So if you are ready for your Japanese snack adventure, please use our link and coupon code EATS10 to start your own Bokusu subscription. You save 10% up to $47 and you get to munch on some great Japanese snacks.
You just call me a munch?
It's really important to make sure that you're not putting your own expectations on what you believe Japan should have been. Accept the culture for what it is, accept the people for who they are, and I think you'll be in a much better position that when you come out of the frustration phase, you didn't convince yourself that Japan is a bad country and Japanese people are all bad people.
Moving to a completely new country with a different culture from your own country is just already overwhelming, right? If you have something that makes you really feel happy, for example, if you love drawing, bring your favorite drawing kits to Japan, and then whenever you feel frustration or when you feel lonely,
You look like
start
she get
doing
great hugs.
whatever you really enjoy doing it. If you're not happy, make
I
yourself
would never
happy
know that.
first. Then
And she
you
sucks
challenge.
great dick.
Recharge.
Whoa, that's her man on the left.
The ups and downs of living in
That
Japan.
man is a
Everybody
loser.
is going to go through them.
Wild,
I'm
man,
pretty sure
man.
I can say that there's
Man.
one
He
absolutely
take
positive
L's on the
thing
floor.
that you're gonna
I give him
find
a fat
when you're
L.
living in Japan,
Man.
and that is a Japanese convenience store.
Yes,
guarantee
there's
she
just
she
so
hasn't
many
seen a real
amazing
nigga in her
things
life yet.
about them that I talked about in this video.
She hasn't
So
been
make
hit
sure
with the
you
vibe
watch it,
water.
and I'll see you in
The
that
vibe
video.
water will change your life.
Thanks.
They got a part 2 of this video.